So actually, why don't we just start by introducing ourselves. We'll just kind of go right in order.
Right. Hi, everyone. My name's Dan Cheuvront. I'm with product marketing for IBM Max 360 with Watson.
My name is John Loveland. I'm with Verizon. I lead our product marketing and strategy efforts in our cybersecurity business.
I'm Michael Cranford with Checkpoint. I'm the Threat Prevention Sales Manager for the Southeast.
And I'm Brian Egenrieder. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for SyncDog.
Okay, cool. So we're going to go through a bunch of different topics. We'll get through as much as we can. The good news is it looks like the little timer's not going anywhere, so we have unlimited time to go through.
Go for the rest of the afternoon.
So we'll try and get through as much as we can, and like I said, save some time for questions from the audience. So just in general, like Phil started to touch on the fact that security sort of matters. Security is kind of fundamental, should be a fundamental pillar to how we move forward with all of our digital transformation. But let's just talk first at a high level. The cost of a breach continues to go up. Both from a financial perspective and from a reputation perspective as an organization. And we've seen how something bad happens, the street doesn't sort of like that very much. So just writ large, what are some of the big threat vectors or things that everyone in this room should be worried about when it comes to security, especially as we're going through this digital transformation?
I'll start off. So with that, it's mainly you have to worry about the human aspect. So anyone can accidentally download an app they're not supposed to, or they could open an email that they're not supposed to either. So you need to be worried about the people that are involved, but also you need to stay one step ahead of the people out there who are delivering this malicious content to the world to essentially try to steal information. I represent an organization where that's our top priority, making sure the enterprise data stays safe on the device and everything in between.
Yeah, I would say that just kind of building on what Dan said, that typically it's the employees are the weakest link, right? Whether it be a phishing email or a failure to patch, a vulnerability, what have you. In addition to that, we saw a big increase in ransomware last year. So Verizon every year does the data breach investigations report, and we've been tracking ransomware every year for the last 11 years. We've been doing the report, and we saw a 40% increase in ransomware over the last year. And I think what's interesting about the ransomware epidemic last year is that it really opened the aperture in terms of companies that are vulnerable, right? So, I think every big event like this, more and more people get religion. And I think you saw different industries that hadn't really fully embraced cybersecurity as an area of focus get hacked and get owned by ransomware. And you saw small, medium-sized businesses get hit just as much as big businesses did. So it kind of changed the dynamic in that security is now squarely in the spotlight, every industry, every size of business.
Yeah, I mean, my take on it, and I'll buck the trend of having to go down the line because it'll get annoying for you who has to go first every time. We're at an interesting intersection of obviously hacks and malware and everything else seems to be becoming more and more prolific, but on the same side, people are demanding more productivity, more activity, more access to information on their devices and even their personal devices. So companies at large are, again, at this interesting intersection of how do we enable the employees, how do we get them the data they need to do the jobs they need to do, especially when they're working outside the four walls of the office or the company, but at the same time, make sure you're protecting the data, the corporate IP and things like that. So, at least with SyncDog, what we're doing is really focusing on that issue. And then you pull in the aspect of contractors, third-party workers, people where you simply can't control their phones or the devices they're coming from, but you still need to get them data, and it causes even a more complex problem. So I think that's an interesting aspect of what's going on in the market.
Yeah, at Checkpoint, we found that the longer an infection is in the environment, is the higher cost for remediation. And at Checkpoint, it's not just about detection, because it's great to detect it. The problem is the infections happened. Then you have to have some incident response team to come in to do remediation work, adds on additional costs. So at Checkpoint, we're focused on prevention. So be able to detect the malicious malware or malicious attack and be able to prevent it. You know, stop it at the gate and don't let it in.
Okay, so, and one of the other things as companies are moving towards more cloud-based applications and systems, there's a little bit of challenge. I just came from a client who, very, very large financial services firm with 15,000 or so financial advisors out there, and they have barely adopted anything that's not on-prem. There's this fear that is out there. Sometimes it's due to regulations and so on and so forth, that doesn't allow companies to move forward. But in many cases, it's really the only way to go, and it's certainly a large trend. So, what advice would you guys give to companies who know that they need to go to the cloud, but are worried about the security implications of doing that? What are some of the things that you could maybe advise them or give them some comfort that it's kind of okay, but here are a couple of key steps to take?
Well, I think it's interesting because it speaks to this idea of security moving from a cost center to a business enabler, right? So if you don't have confidence in your security, you're not able to take advantage of some of the cloud capabilities or digital computing capabilities or edge processing, things like that. So, this is where we see a fundamental shift in the thinking in terms of corporate executives and the board around cybersecurity. Clearly, you want to ensure that you're protected and that you're doing everything you can to mitigate the fallout from a cyber breach. But at the same time, you're starting to look at what can I do from a cybersecurity perspective that better enables me to take advantage of digital transformation, right? And so specifically with respect to cloud, the concern is lack of control, lack of visibility of the data, right? So you're used to having the data within your four walls, and you had what you felt was appropriate security around that data, although many would argue it probably wasn't as appropriate as you thought it was. But now that your data is shifted to the cloud, you now have less visibility and theoretically less control. The two issues with respect to the cloud, a lot of issues, but just to kind of boil it down, are access controls and securing the data that's in the cloud, right? So ensuring that you don't have inadvertent disclosure of data or what have you in the cloud. There's technologies that have come online, CASB providers, cloud asset security brokers that provide additional visibility and governance and control in that cloud. That's certainly an option, but I think another big option is really thinking strategically about what data you put in the cloud and how do you specifically guard that data that you put in there, and having a sort of a long-term plan around addressing both the on-prem and cloud-based technologies that you use.
I think moving to the cloud, it's inevitable. It's going to happen, right? Microsoft has already adopted their Azure cloud, right? They quit selling server operating systems. So they see that, and customers will end up embracing it, if not already today, both public cloud, private cloud, software as a service, and then, like you said, moving the data into those environments. You've got to make sure that it's secure, right? Yep. So when you secure those environments, it's not only securing those environments, but the devices that are accessing those environments. So it's great that that's secure, but if you have a compromised device accessing that data, you're not going to be secure. So it's both the endpoint and the access to those cloud environments.
Yep. And to your point, when it comes to the evolution of, cloud's not going away, that's going to be the new or the current model of business. I don't think that on-prem will necessarily go away, but it is harder to maintain because the way the technology moves so quickly, getting software and updates down to those servers that you have on-prem, that's essentially time and money lost. So when you have a cloud solution, that can be pushed down instantly, right over the air, and excuse me. And you can also make sure that it does stay secure. Make sure that your data center, whatever you're using, or whatever solution you're using, make sure that it is localized. It does follow those local federal laws. So, for instance, like Master 360 is like FISMA certified, FedRAMP certified, SOC 2 Type 2 compliant. We have to follow a lot of other federal laws, but our other centers around the world, they have to follow those laws as well.
Yeah, and my take on it is on-prem, if constructed properly, maintained properly, and you've got a large team on it that's constantly updating and making sure everything's state of the art, is always going to be more secure. But the simple truth is that is very expensive to do. And now with the advancements in cloud technology, there's threats no matter which way you're coming from, and I think companies have to make that decision. Are we going to invest the time and the money and the effort to ensure our on-prem is actually maintained and updated properly? And if so, it is going to be more reliable and reliant, I guess. But the fact is, very few companies have that ability to really stay up to date with everything. So, in my view, I think the cloud's inevitably going to be more secure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that on-prem is theoretically more secure, because now kind of in this mobile world where we're trying to take that information that is in that like secure little box, but make it available to all of our workers who are outside in the real world, like doing their jobs, then you're still going over the communications transport out over the different carriers and so on, and so you still have a lot of work to do to secure it from there, from that perspective. So it's
but I'd say there's options available though. I mean, I would actually disagree, and when you say that it's actually more secure within the four walls.
Should we take this outside?
Yeah.
No, this is great. I love it.
No, I think ultimately, clearly there are going to be SaaS providers that aren't as secure, but the big enterprise applications, the Microsoft and Salesforce, their business is providing that security, and we should be in a position to enforce those security controls via SLA. And I think they're always going to have more resources than most companies. Clearly, there's going to be if you look at sort of large financial services companies, they're going to be able to have the resources to create that secure environment. Most companies are not.
Yeah.
And so if you can focus on, again, the access control and how that data is being used and shared, and then put the security controls to the SaaS provider, managed with an SLA, I think you're ultimately in a better position.
Well, yeah, I think we'll agree to agree in this one, because that's essentially what I was trying to say. I wanted to, anybody that was focusing on on-prem, I didn't want to insult, but I agree. I mean, it's very hard to actually keep up with everything, so SaaS is probably inevitably more secure.
But that kind of leads us into this next part of the conversation of, based on, Brian, you had referenced that, sometimes you have users who, have devices like, third parties and contractors who have devices that we're not controlling. So then the other part of this question, forget where the data initially resides versus where it goes. How do we figure out that balance between kind of like security and productivity? What information do we allow? What are the mechanisms that we have to control, what type of data they see, what type of, actions they can take in the field?
So I'll take that one. With IBM security, there's identity management. So you need to vet those specific users and say, okay, you have access to this specific set of data. You can't share it out to anyone else, and it has to stay within this container and within these specific documents that you have access to. And another set of users, through policy, they won't have access to that data, but you can give them access to something else. And you can also make that uniform for your other devices. So it can be available on like a phone, a tablet, laptop or desktop, something like that. So as long as you authenticate, then you have access to it.
Checkpoint's, I did want to say
go right ahead.
Yeah, Checkpoint's incident response team did a study and found that of the, I think it was about 250 incidents, of those incidents around SaaS apps, 54% of those incidents were around account takeovers. About 30 to 35% is around malware, and the rest was around DLP incidents. So we found that account takeovers has been the prominent evil that's been happening or occurring around SaaS apps, because once the hacker has those credentials, they have, the keys to the keys to the kingdom. So, so Checkpoint actually has a technology coming out in the next couple of weeks called CloudGuard for SaaS. Within that, we have a patent pending technology called ID Guard, which will actually allow companies to say, a user is authorized to access the SaaS app only with this device, only within this certain geography. So it's going to be pretty impressive to be able to provide those controls.
Yeah, and I think it is and I led off with it, I think, of that balance between productivity and security. And I always say it's kind of a seesaw. You know, the more security goes up, productivity goes down, and vice versa. And it is a problem that a lot of people are facing. And you know, passionate to me because that's exactly what SyncDog is trying to do, is create a containerized solution, but bring all the applications and the functionality and the data access you would expect on your desktop and put it in a secure workspace, as we call it, that is containerized, and it is, you know, encrypted data at rest and in transit. So we're trying to take as much as that threat away from the aspect, and certainly the authentication. You know, we were built around a DoD type of a project, so having that 256-bit encryption is really important. But you know, separating the data from the device is really what our focus is, and then obviously separating personal from corporate use, separate that IP. And go to great lengths to ensure that even if somebody does get into that phone, is able to access the operating system level, your corporate data is still intact. So that is something that we really focus heavily on.
You could say I really like that approach, because at the end of the day, it is about the data, right? Because your data is going to exist in a lot of different locations, whether it be with SaaS providers or vendors or whatever you have. So, you know, traditional security has been about securing my four walls. But now, you know, the four walls are blurred. You've got very complex supply chains that include the SaaS providers, that include other people that, you know, handle your data. So you have to take a data-centric approach. We've been historically more of a network-centric kind of business, cybersecurity has been. Now it's about the data. So how do you secure your data at third parties? How do you secure your data on mobile devices, wherever it would be? That has to be the focus.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that point, with like the Master 360 container, for instance, you know, that is encrypted with 256-bit encryption, but you can also set up multi-factor authentication as well. So like using biometrics for the device for using like a smartphone or a tablet, and on top of that, getting into the device itself and then to the app, you have to go through multiple layers just to get to that data. And 9 times out of 10, you know, if it's not your fingerprint or your face, you're not going to get into it.
Yeah, and what's kind of interesting, at least I see this at clients, and I don't know if you guys have similar feedback, but you can come up with all these kind of data-oriented policies, and you know, based on what's the data classification, is it super sensitive information or not, who the user, what the role is, and you can kind of deal with that based on groups. You know, but what I often see is that those policies are never thought through kind of like fundamentally and philosophically. So it's like, as every app comes up, like we have this conversation about, hey, we've got this going on, like what should we do? Like what should we allow? And you get this kind of like dog's breakfast of policy, you know, that is employed throughout the organization, you know, as opposed to looking at it once, figuring out, all right, based on this user, based on whether the device is managed or not, you know, are we using multi-factor or not, you know, this is how we're going to implement it. And every app is going to work the same way. So you don't have to kind of relitigate, you know, this whole, you know, how should we secure this device?
To me, it gets to security, you have an equal seat at the table, right? I mean, if you've got, I think where you see this, you know, this Frankenstack of different solutions and policies or dog's breakfast, you know, it gets to the point that the security team is always reacting, right? Somebody has a new app they want to roll out, a new device, a new way of doing business, and security is playing catch up to that, right? So I think that, you know, ultimately where we need to go from a digital transformation perspective is that security has a seat at the table and is able to, you know, implement security by design during the development process as opposed to reacting.
So, but do you see that security doesn't have a seat at the table? Like I see more often than not, security is the one kind of reining in, you know,
well, but
everything
I guess it's
because they don't have a table, they rein in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a question of when, right? And you know, I think this is again where security is going and certainly needs to go, is that during the design phase, during the ideation phase of new products and new technologies, things like that, security has, you know, a role in that, right? So it's you're thinking about from the get-go. And I think the other piece of this is just, again, back to the point of thinking about security more strategically, right? Mm-hmm. How do we look at it as a business enabler as opposed to a cost center? Because when it's viewed as a cost center, then it's all the focus is always going to be on how do we minimize the cost. But if it's viewed as a business enabler, then there's the conversation around, okay, what do we need to do proactively as opposed to reactively to put ourselves on good footing so we can, enter new markets, take new advantage of applications and things like that. So,
And it's also about managing risk. Customers are always evaluating how much risk are they willing to take on.
right.
And then from there, they'll offset that gap with cyber insurance, but the thing is, if they do have the security controls in place, it's going to be able to lower that premium, on that insurance. So it's just about managing risk.
And I think another major aspect that I think gets overlooked a lot is creating a secure environment that works for the employee. It's not the best analogy, but I draw a parallel to the taxi cab industry in Uber. We all tolerated having to stand outside in the rain hailing a cab for the longest time until the idea came up. But what I see in a lot of security solutions, they're cumbersome. They're, people are having to multi-factor authenticate to go get a boarding pass on their phone or to show a picture of your pet. And so they start finding workarounds. They do everything they can to get around the security factors. So, creating an environment that makes more sense to what the end users are actually trying to do, or trying to do with their devices, in our case, that we focus on mobile devices, but and free them up on the things that don't need that same level of security. So isolating that day-to-day use versus accessing sensitive data, so they're not compelled to work around it, and then bring additional functionality that they might say, hey, I'm encouraged to get into that environment even though it's more secure and I do have to multi-factor authenticate or whatever the case may be, but I'm getting more out of that, so it's not cumbersome to do so.
Yeah, the hacks are great. I mean, I'm sure you guys have great stories to tell as well, but I love when you see that, I've got a business device, and then, I've got a problem and I want to try and send a screenshot to, the help desk so they can help me figure out what the heck's going on and how to fix it. And of course that's disallowed, to do that. So they take their personal device, they take a phone, they send it via Gmail. And so all the things that you try to do to lock down that device to maintain that air of security is totally...
It's already compromised typically.
To that point, that's where, we have a philosophy with Mass 360 is to be proactive rather than reactive. I mean, by all means be reactive because, you need to make sure everything stays in line. But to your example of needing IT support, we actually integrate with TeamViewer where the admin can pull up the user's device right on their screen, control it, take care of what they need to do, and then they're done. They don't need to come in the office or what have you. When you're out in the field, the clock's ticking, and that saves a lot of time and cost.
So, something else, all of y'all platforms do a great job in helping secure the device and secure the information from the system to the device. And we provide, and collectively we provide a lot of capability to our customers to implement that properly and take advantage of all that we offer. But oftentimes, you can go in and see that, well, they've got 12 policies, they're all kind of monolithically applied to everybody. How often do you see that as kind of an issue where someone feels like, hey, I didn't get what I thought I was getting here? It has nothing to do with the capabilities in and of itself. It's just that they haven't gone through that process.
I think that's one of the biggest issues right now. It's in not just policies, but technology, right? Getting maximum effectiveness out of the technologies that you have, and this is Verizon's approach, right? So we're not a technology vendor, right? We're a solutions provider, and our opportunity typically is coming in and taking a look at the Frankenstack and making sense of it, and rationalizing and orchestrating it, right? So you get the better, best bang for the buck out of it. And then we've even got so far as to put a risk scoring method around our solutions and around our customers' environment, so that you can take a look to see how certain investments are affecting your security posture score. Call it the Verizon Risk Report. So I think that's fundamentally one of the biggest challenges our industry's faced right now. In that it's the days of the CISO, I think, going to RSA and getting a blank check and going out to buy whatever they want to stack and make everybody feel good about it are coming to an end, because you're getting more scrutiny from the board and the executives. And to your point, it's become an enterprise risk management issue, right? More than anything else.
That's right.
And with that's going to come increased scrutiny about what am I getting in return for that investment, and am I maximizing my investment in that technology or that program to secure my environment.
Yeah, there's a lot of dysfunctional selling that's going on, in the industry. And I think if you properly do a consultative selling process of asking the right questions through the discovery process, is it a pain that you're trying to, overcome, or is there a gain that you're needing? Let's talk about the resources where it's people, time, and money. Do you actually have the people to do this? If not, we need to make sure we have the pro services, engaged in the front end to make sure we get this solution scoped properly. How soon do you need it done? Obviously, the shorter amount of time, the more people you're going to need, the more money you're going to need. So it's having that upfront discussion with the customer and making sure that they understand, based on what your concerns are, you're going to need this much resources in order to get it done. And as long as you involve all the decision makers in the process of making sure that you understand what their concerns are, then at that time you're able to offer the exact solution, right? To avoid those pitfalls of not getting something deployed or missing a gap within the security solution.
Yeah, I see a lot of companies that we talk to, at least, that, again, the analogy I draw is, it's like putting 40 Band-Aids on a broken arm. They've got the antivirus, they got the malware detection, and the point you made before, it's about prevention. It's about keeping it from happening. Isolate the data from the danger, in a sense. If it happens on the phone, the data's still protected. Or, again, I'm only focused on mobile here, so I apologize for those that aren't interested. But, it's getting to that point where you've got so many solutions in place that they start working against each other, or become so cumbersome that, again, people just find workarounds or whatever. So it really is just separating the data from the noise and just making sure that's safe. And then, malware's going to happen, but make sure it's minimal, if no impact whatsoever, other than maybe to their personal device, and they just have to go get another one or reset it all, but the data's safe.
All right, so mobile security, I think, is solved-ish, to a large extent. I think that we've come a long way with that. So let's maybe pivot a little bit, and we've talked about in a couple of the talks, IoT. Now that we're adding billions of devices, like, we're increasing our threat surface area kind of geometrically, and frankly, a lot of the devices that we're putting out there are very hard to, even if we had a patch, it's almost impossible to deploy them, because those devices, because there are billions of them, we want to be cheap enough, and therefore you make these compromises in terms of what you can do. So thinking about IoT and looking at it with regard to security, like, what are some of these new challenges that we face as we look to implement that technology, and what can we do to try and address them, or at least mitigate somewhat?
I think that you would have to really address the market and where the industry is going. For instance, Windows CE is going to be end of life, I think, either next year or the year after. But in that case, there are other devices that are coming into play and other operating systems that can be managed, because there's a need there. So with Mass 360, we can manage these devices, from scanners to ruggedized devices down to printers. And we, because of that unified approach to it, we were actually named a leader by IDC in ruggedized IoT. So that way, regardless of how many devices you have, you can push that down to them over the air, and you don't have to worry about going from site to site to site just to get them updated. You can just do it from the comfort of your own office.
Verizon, since we're a network operator, right, we run the wireless networks, the IoT communication typically goes over our network, or one of our competitors' networks. So we view it as a multi-layer issue to address, right? Everything from the device itself, in terms of validating via certificates that a device should be allowed to operate on its network or transmit, looking at the behavioral analytics of that device, so you're baselining what the standard performance of that device would be, or the standard sort of data flow would be, all the way back up to the network, and looking for anomalies across the network itself. And so I think that's the way we have to think of IT, and frankly, operating technology too, right? So it's the machines on the shop floor. Don't forget Target. The breach came through the HVAC system that was internet connected, right? So I think IoT has got to be a multi-layer design around the security to get it from all the way from the device layer through the network layer back into the data itself and where it's held.
Yeah, customers with SCADA systems or in healthcare, they're the ones that have the biggest challenge with all these devices. But one common thread with IoT is IP, right? And it's riding on the network. So Checkpoint is working on some pretty innovative things I can't talk about right now, but the way we address it today is understanding either the operating system that the device is using, or what protocol is communicating with, understanding what the vulnerabilities are, and we're creating indicators of compromise to be able to prevent an attack on those systems.
Yeah, and I'll throw out there, first of all, anybody that hasn't solved mobile yet, like you said, it's solved, come talk to us, we'll help.
I said ish.
Ish, okay, but happy to help there. But it still kind of comes back to at least the direction that we're taking of separating the data from the device. Make it device independent, and it becomes this a bit of an elegance of how you're securing that data. That then IoT is the natural next step. It's a natural process, and continuing to put that data out into the places it needs to be, collect the data from the places you need to get it, but make sure it's secure and as device independent as you can make it. Obviously, there's all types of things that you have to take into consideration, but if you can separate that data from the device, not simple, I don't want to downplay the whole process as a whole, but it just creates a natural next step.
Okay. So kind of last thing before we take a couple of questions is I wanted to talk about another kind of emerging technology and how it impacts security, which is AI and machine learning. So it's, tell me just a little bit like your perspective of how you think it's a part of the security puzzle. How much of it is just better ability to detect versus trigger, responses and such.
So with Mass 360, of course, it's in the name. It's with Watson. So there's your AI component right there. But we started on our portal level just by offering insights for admins, whether there's like a new threat out in the environment that you would need to get taken care of. Here's the steps. Just basic updates saying like, hey, there's 12 people out here that haven't updated their operating system. They need to do that, or just basic information. Soon we're going to be able to, rather than just provide the steps and information, you'll be able to just click a button and it will do it for you. There's also our policy recommendation engine. So when you go to create a policy, it will match you to your other peers in the industry just to try to match up what they're doing to make sure that stays secure. There's also our AI assistant for the end user, like within the Mass 360 app, that you can basically just talk to your app to find information, even IT help support, like resetting passwords, things of that nature. We're also going to be integrating our natural language processes into the portal so you can actually talk to your portal. And also app analytics. That's another big one we released this year. You'll be able to, or you currently are able to, look at all the apps that you've sent out to your users, and apps are an investment, and you can actually see which ones have installed, which ones are even using it, and then you can make a determination to see if that was actually worth the investment and pull that money back.
I think of security as a big data problem, bottom line, and the more devices that are deployed, whether it be IoT or mobile, as your threat surface increases, you're collecting more and more data from log data or from different technologies on the network. And there's a study that we did last year that showed that the time to compromise a network is actually going down, but the time to detect that compromise is actually getting longer. And as I think you had said, those sort of longer dwell time you have, the more damage somebody can do, right? So it's about, for us, it's about leveraging AI and analytics. In fact, we bought a company, an AI company last year, just focused on this, to reduce the noise that comes out of all of the data you're collecting. So you can have your SOC analysts and focus on the incidents of compromise that are the riskiest to the business. It's separating the wheat from the chaff. Because security, I think, increasingly becomes this big data problem, and AI is a great solution for addressing that.
I think AI is important, but it also can get kind of scary, because when you deal with artificial intelligence and it's making decisions on false information, then you're going to get a great deal of false verdicts. or false positives. So at that point, you would want to make sure that you're validating the verdicts. But at Checkpoint, we do use AI within our advanced threat prevention cloud called Sandblast. One example of we use 3 different engines that use AI. One is called campaign hunting. So obviously there's millions of logs coming from millions of devices, and being able to correlate that and understand if there's an attack coming in from a mobile device in 2 minutes coming in from the network, and then it's hitting maybe a SaaS app or something in the cloud, being able to understand that and pull that together saying, yes, Mr. Customer, you have a campaign that's coming against you. That's one of the examples of how we use it. But it is important, just caution.
I don't know if I have much more to add than anybody, but I'm on a panel, so I'm going to talk. But I agree with John. It's a data problem, and I think AI just becomes a multiplier. It's going to multiply the amount of data coming in. It's going to multiply your ability to detect it. It's going to multiply your ability to get exposed. So it's just something you have to factor in, is that everything's going to speed up and everything's going to get larger in a sense, both good and bad. And but it's here to stay. It's just something you have to face.
And to that point real quick is that, AI can be scary, but when you have your solution, you want to look for, having a partner as well that can integrate with that. Like we have an announcement with Moderator coming out tomorrow, so keep your eyes peeled for it, where you can actually minimize those risks a lot faster than you normally would.
Okay. So got a couple of minutes left. Do we have any questions from the audience?
It's hard to see.
Hands anywhere? I can't see a damn thing, but. Okay, all right, no questions? All right. So.
Question?
Wait.
Owen? Is there a question?
I don't know that there was a question. I think there was a clap because he thought we were going to get out of here. Yeah, but I was going to ask then if there are no questions, just kind of like any closing thoughts, comments, recommendations, out to these fine folks in the audience.
One of the things I want to hit on, I'm sorry, I'm coming out
go
of
for it,
turn
go
here. In the beginning, you were talking about one of the things to be concerned about, and still the number one attack vector is phishing. And with that, another concern to be about would be, thinking about vulnerabilities, is the CPU level detection, because there's a lot of exploits out there that are happening at the exploit at the CPU level. So being able to make sure you're able to detect those is very important.
Yeah, another recommendation I would have is, of course, do research ahead of time, but also try it out. See if whatever solution you're looking for fits your needs and what you can do and what the solution can do to come together to make sure that it stays as secure and effective as possible for both you and the user.
Let's go to Brian, so we keep this switching around a little bit.
No real closing thoughts other than a shameless plug that, again, if you're looking for a solution that, if you're heading down BYOD, or if you're heading, lots of consultants or contractors where, again, you need to extract that data from the device, where you can't control every device in the environment, or you don't want a device, or all the millennials in your company are asking, why the heck am I carrying 2 smartphones every day? If you're dealing with all those issues, love to talk to you more.
Yeah, and I would say that I think a lot of companies are increasingly faced with a build versus buy decision when it comes to security. And not unlike other SaaS-based offerings, there are managed security offerings, right? And one of the biggest challenges I think we all face in the industry is lack of access to talent and experience in managing that. And so I think that there's an opportunity for companies to partner with managed services providers like Verizon, like IBM, like others, to help bridge that gap, right, between their ability to sort of maintain the level of security and agility and flexibility that they need to, while still enabling the business in its journey and transformation. There's opportunities for partners. You don't have to go it alone.
Okay, awesome. So Dan, John, Michael, and Brian, thank you guys so much. Thank you guys for listening. And I guess we got
Back in a minute.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.